there is identity that we all have that comes with hair.
Yeah,
You
and this kind of willingness to let go of one identity for another, and I think that's what I appreciated about you.
I've had all types, like red, name it. But when I went blonde, I was a little worried. Are people gonna think like I'm dating a white man and now I'm trying to be like white?
Yeah. I didn't feel somehow that I would be desirable if I was bald, if I appeared older than I was. There was all this stuff that obviously isn't true, but there were all these imaginations and projections that I had. And I was like, well, you love me. So I just bought, before I met you, I bought a pack of Rogaine from Costco. I like the big pack. And I just threw it away.
You did?
I was done. Welcome to the Interracial Couple Podcast.
My name is Cera. I'm black.
I'm Matthew. I'm white. And on our podcast, it's not all black and white. Welcome to this week's episode. So as you can see, for those of you watching,
we are both
bald and beautiful.
And beautiful. So
we are the bald and the beautiful.
That's the theme for this week.
Yeah. A week ago, a little less than a week ago, actually on Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, Cera got up and said,
what did you say?
He said, I want to be in solidarity with you, love of my life. I am going to cut off all my hair.
I know. It just was like, we were talking about a couple months ago, I had dyed my hair blonde. And I've been trying to dye my hair blonde. Trying to dye my hair to a blondish color, and it never worked. And finally it worked. But then I was kind of bored of the blonde, and I was just like, you know what? In honor of the Jewish New Year, I am going to cut my hair. Yeah. And I did the next day. So I went and told everyone and my friends and family that tomorrow I'm cutting my hair. And sure enough, the next day I cut my hair. And it brought up a few emotions when I cut my hair. And it's not the first time that I've cut my hair. It's the first time I've cut my hair this short. If you can see it is...
So first we used a buzzer, a really, really fine one. And then we bicked it, which was basically with a safety razor all the way down so that it felt like a baby's bottom.
It did feel like a baby's butt. I would touch my head and be like, oh my God, it's so soft. It's so squishy. Anyway, so with that, I was just like, there's so much identity with hair that we have. And so cutting my hair made me think about all the identities that I've had over the years about my hair. It was emotional. I remember at one point cutting it and I was on video and this one woman was like, oh my God, I hope you don't have cancer. And I was like, no, I do not. I'm not sick. I don't have cancer. This is just for fashion. And I was like, is it really just for fashion? After I was thinking it to myself, is it really for fashion? Or is it that when I cut my hair, it's almost kind of makes me choose some way an identity, So yeah. And I was like, this is a good podcast to talk about all the identities that we have had about our hairs.
Yeah, because I think hair, for whatever reason, our culture puts a lot on hair. And it could be easy to say that it puts more on hair with women than it does for men. And I think there's, I would say market spend probably would prove that. But, I am a bald man, and that was something that was hard for me to accept for a really long time. I invested in Rogaine for about a decade.
What's Rogaine? For those who don't know.
Rogaine is it's either drops or a foam that you put on your scalp, and it keeps your hair from falling out. There's also a pharmaceutical called Propecia that was actually developed to help men with enlarged prostates, and they found their byproduct of that has made your hair stop falling out. Some people get hair transplants and then take Propecia for the rest of their life to keep the hair transplants from falling out. I looked into all of those things because there was an identity I had with my hair. There was a bit of a wanting to look younger. I used to pride myself on looking younger than I was. Even going back, hair was actually a big part of my identity. I remember a couple of times in my life when I was a kid crying from a haircut. I didn't like the haircut and I cried. And I also had very long locks at one point when I was a teenager, and shaving it off, it was like, you can talk about this too. It was almost like made me sick to my stomach. It was this really weird thing that what do we put in our hair? And we're not, not the only one, right? The Sikhs actually, they, religiously don't cut their hair. It's a connection to God, to the spiritual world. So yeah, we do put a lot in hair.
Yeah, there is a lot of in hair. So for me, my 20s were shaped by the fact that I had dreadlocks.
What do you mean shaped? How did dreadlocks shape a decade of your life?
Good question. People describe me as the girl with dreadlocks, so there is, for Black people who are listening to this, there is a way you are viewed when you have dreads. It's almost like, quote unquote, a culture of dread. Like there is a culture of dreadlocks. And I didn't think that I belonged to the culture of dreadlocks. Like I'm not like into reggae or raga, but there is a way that when you have dreads, it's like you're embracing this, like it was the first kind of steps for Black women to start embracing natural hair. And I didn't know that I was embracing natural hair. I was just tired of going to the salon, to be honest. And so I transitioned into dreadlocks thinking that, this is going to be easy to maintain. Not that it is. For those who have dreadlocks, they know, and it takes a long time to lock. Mm-hmm. So it took a couple months before my hair locked, if not a year. And then I just was like the girl with the dreadlocks. And I was just like, yeah. And eventually I became like, people would be like, oh, that girl, like the Black girl with the dreadlocks. And I started describing my hair as like, oh yeah, if you like, look, the woman with the dreadlocks, that's me, the girl with the dreadlocks. And cutting my hair off was cutting it when I turned 30, which was like the thing. I was like, you know what? There was something I knew on my 30th birthday that I wanted to cut my hair as a gift to myself. I just felt like my hair, the dreads, carried some weight and pain of my 20s with them. And I wanted to reinvent myself. And the way I wanted to reinvent myself, I felt like it had to do with my hair. Okay. So I invited all my friends to bagels and orange juice, which is like my favorite thing to have on my birthday. And I was like, we are going to do a ceremony and we're going to cut my hair. I didn't think it was going to be as emotional as it turned out to be. And I cut them and I looked in the mirror and I just cried. Afterwards, I was like, oh my God, I look like a boy. And it brought these memories of like when I was a kid and people would tease my head. Like the boys, first of all, like boys would tease me that my head looked like, I had this shape. My head looked like a bus, the British school buses.
Man, kids are so cruel.
Kids can be mean. And so I really had never examined my head. Like I was asking my friend, does my head look like the shape of a bus? Does my head look like sometimes they would be like, it looks like the shape of the bus. They would call it in Swahili what we call kisogo. And they would also say like, it looked like the shape of a bread. Remember those breads that used to be like
a round loaf?
Exactly.
Okay. Breadhead?
Breadhead. And so here I am at 30 years old, and I'm like thinking about things kids said when I was 10.
Wow.
And I was like going to my friends and asking for validation, like, does my head look like a bus? Does it look like a loaf? And my friends are like, no, you have a beautiful head. But just because my friends said I had a beautiful head, I didn't believe it. It took a while before I could really accept like my head is my head. It's what I got. But it was something, cutting my dreadlocks.
So that was 30.
Yeah.
And now 5.5 years later, you went full, like you bicked it. You went straight to the skin. So when you had that feeling of crying, was there any similarity this time around, or what was different?
There was something different. Definitely. I feel like emotionally, I have grown. Like I am more confident in who I am, and I've always been confident. So I'm thinking like I'm confident in the way that I look. I'm confident in my skin color. Like I'm confident as a Black woman. That's not an issue. But there was still something there that is not necessarily confidence. So in my 30th birthday, like I was just like, yeah, maybe you could call that. Like I needed validation from people that I knew. But this time when I cut it, I went to the mirror and I looked at myself. And rather than like saying like, Cera, you look like a boy, I was like, Cera, you're so beautiful. And then I was like, actually, I want to even go farther. So I asked you if you could shave it all off
with the razor I use for my head and my face.
Yeah, and it was still like hard. Like I would look at myself and be like, wait, who is this woman? Like you still look, it wasn't that huge of a difference, but it is, And so
it feels very different. I don't think there's any way around that, because I mean, if I think even for me, like, when I finally decided that I had no hair left to pretend about and it was time to just, shave it, I had already completely accepted the fact that I was never going to have another hairstyle that was beyond, a centimeter. And the only real shift from that, which was, several years ago, to about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, when I realized that anything beyond 2 millimeters wasn't going to work for me anymore. I shave with a razor every 2 to 3 days. That wasn't a big jump for me. The big jump was long locks when I was a teenager to completely shaving it off. And in fact, when we did, I was in Germany and about to go on a big hitchhiking trip with my best friend. And I was like, you know what? It's time for something else. I'd had long hair for a while. I was ready for something else. And as a joke, Benny and Julian, two of my best friends in the world, cut a mohawk. So I had this mohawk and I still had really long hair. So it was, went down to the middle of my back and started all the way up my forehead and all the way went back. And it was a joke. We're like, oh, let's just do this, right? And then we're like, that's kind of cool. And I forget if one of his sisters came in or someone did a French braid. Yeah, it must have been one of Benny's sisters came in and did a French braid. And that was my hairstyle for, the next several months was a French braided mohawk. And it was almost like that was this little thing that was kind of like holding on to something as though it almost would have been too much for me just to shave it, because it was this big identity thing that I had formed.
Yeah. So where are you today with like your hair and how your confidence with it, like acceptance?
Well, someone mentioned the other day like that the acceptance of it exudes a certain amount of confidence, which I guess is true. The other side of it is that it's actually, is it confidence or is it just, I really don't have any other options? And I can kind of look at it realistically, which is that the bald spot with a little, with a little sort of rim around the head is just not really a great look. It's almost like that's a look of holding on to something that you don't have anymore,
Yeah.
And, it's, I see it. I see men have that, the comb over. A little bit of that is also like, I'm just not quite ready. And I did my own version of that. About 29 years old, 28, 29, my hair was really, really thinning. And if I didn't do something soon, I wasn't going to have any hair. So as I mentioned, I started using Rogaine and that kept my hair from falling out. And it worked pretty well for about 10 years, but it was this dependency I had on it. And it was really that I just felt like I wasn't ready. And in some ways, when I look back on it, I actually wasn't, because being bald, for me, there was a certain sort of age thing about it. And when, I'm not necessarily afraid of growing older, and certainly not anymore. But there was also a little bit of tying in with aging and wisdom. And I didn't have the wisdom to be gray. I didn't have the wisdom to be bald. I didn't have the wisdom to be really wrinkly. And like I said, I kind of prided myself on my youthful appearance that, people always thought I was 5 to 10 years younger than I was, which was funny because I'd be like, oh yeah, I've got teenage daughters or whatever. And people would, jaw would hit the ground. Wait, how old are you? You look, you're 28 or something. I was like, no, I'm not actually. Not that much older, but not 28. But there was, this identity that I wasn't quite ready to shed. And so much of it, I don't also think was my own. It was a projection. So I was holding on to something that was actually time to let go of. And I'd told myself at a certain point, I said, you know, when I'm 40, I'll just go ahead and go bald. And I met you when I was 39. And the funny thing is within 3 or 4 weeks of dating you, I actually knew that I had met the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. There wasn't a question about that. And the funny thing about my hair was I literally took, I just bought, before I met you, I bought a pack of Rogaine from Costco. I like the big pack. And I just threw it away.
You did?
I was done. And there is definitely a piece that I didn't feel somehow that I would be desirable if I was bald, if I appeared older than I was. There was all this stuff that obviously isn't true, but there were all these imaginations and projections that I had. And I was like, well, you love me. So I threw it away and I started basically just buzzing my head, keeping it really short. And you loved it. And you know, and it's not even about you, because even when I was balding, there were quite a few women who I knew or female friends that'd be like, you know, there's a lot of women who really love bald men, or I love bald men, or whatever. But it didn't matter. You know, people can say it all you want. Someone can say you're beautiful all they want. How many beautiful people in the world, particularly beautiful women, are told all the time, you're so beautiful, and yet they don't feel like they're beautiful. Yeah. It doesn't matter what someone else says to you. It's how do you actually feel? And I think what you just said, kind of to pivot back to your story, was when you looked in the mirror this time and didn't have to sort of justify anything. You didn't have to try to convince yourself, and you also didn't have to, you know, go to this thing, oh my God, I look like a boy. But more like, God, I'm beautiful. And that's actually a part of your, it's what I'll say is one of the things that attracted me to you also was that you were really secure in your looks. And I'm going to qualify that before you jump in, because a lot of people from the outside can say, oh, well, that's easy for you to say, you're beautiful. But it's just, once again, like, I know so many beautiful people who are very self-conscious and don't feel beautiful. And it's really just kind of like, are you going to decide that that's beautiful to you in the same way that at one point you thought mom jeans were ugly, and then you thought, oh, they're actually kind of cute. Or you used to think a certain type of style was ugly, and then you're like, oh, I've seen that on other people and now I'm used to it. And then you're like, oh no, I really like that. We can actually grow to appreciate or not appreciate something based on a choice.
Yeah. I know, like, for some people it's really hard, but for me, I just, at some point, and I don't know when this happened, I really started affirming myself. Like, I look in the mirror, and I'm not kidding, and I'm like, I look at myself and I'm like, I am the most beautiful person I've ever seen. And I look in the mirror and I'm just like, oh my God, Cera, you're beautiful, as if someone else is talking to me. And I've done it for so long, but I am so happy I still do this practice, because in a world where, you know, women who look like me and not, you know, are not what people think of as beauty, is like, I have to be the person who tells myself that I am beautiful. Like, and also the other thing is like when I went to school and like I see other women, I'm just like, I am I'm beautiful in my own ways. Like, I don't compare. Not that other women are not beautiful. I see beautiful women all the time, you know, beautiful Black women, beautiful white women, beautiful Asian women. But for me, it's never been like, I was just like, my beauty is unique to me, you know? And so I think that affirming myself really helped, because I wasn't going to wait for the world to affirm me. And I wasn't going to await my friends to affirm me. So I was just like, I do it myself, and it really works.